Well, hello, Covenant Army, and welcome to the podcast. We're so happy that you decided to join us today. Remember, like, share, and subscribe. Check us out on all the different platforms. Helps us get the message out, helps spread the word. And also, if you've not been to the Covenant Army store, if you're watching the video here, we'll show you this here too. We've just got in, these are like fake Stanley Cups, right? they're like half the price of a Stanley Cup. But these are a new Covenant Army. It's a white cup of the Covenant Army for you folks that are just listening. It's got the branding on there, and it also has the cross on the back, which stand for God, stand for marriage, stand for family. They're available now in the store. That's my wife's cup there now. She loves it.
It's just nice and pretty,
for
now.
Yeah, people were asking, like, we need a cup. And we're like, okay, let's get them a Stanley Cup. But they were like crazy price, so we found this one here. It's comparable. You use it every night, babe. How's it hold with like the ice and keeping everything fresh?
It's pretty good. I mean, I don't like to keep a lot of ice because I don't like it to be too cold. But it's pretty good. I mean, it does the job for me. I'm just a water and lemon drinker.
Yeah.
That's all I drink in it.
But does it keep your drink cool? I mean,
yeah, it does actually. Because yesterday I had kept it in the car for big parts of the day.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't have a lot of ice, the water didn't get warm in it. So it was good.
Well, that was a test because, the whole thing with Stanley when it broke out, was it last year all that happened with the Stanley Cups where the car caught on fire and the only thing left was a Stanley Cup and it still had ice in it? Everybody went crazy buying these cups, and I think we just seen them at Macy's this weekend.
I don't think I want to light it on fire. I think we're good.
I was going to test it. That was going to be my next test. I wanted to set it on fire to see if it held the ice inside.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do that.
Yeah, but I think it's covered by God. It's like a Holy Spirit thing here that keeps it cool.
Sure.
Keep it out of the pit of the hot place.
Sure.
But anyway, guys, just joking there. The store is now open. You can find the link anywhere you're watching the podcast. Click that Linktree link. And there's a store link in there. You can go check out all the different Covenant Army gear. We got the cups. We got the hats. We got the shirts. We got the polo. We got it all there. Like we are blowing the seams of the Covenant Army store. You get anything you want, all things Covenant Army. So now back to serious business on the podcast today, babe. Over the weekend, actually started this, I think last week sometime, we ran across a video, a YouTube video actually that
podcast.
A podcast, YouTube video podcast that someone we know shared, and just her story write up, because it was a personal story she shared with the video about how this topic was so important for her as a mom and as a family. It's like, man, we went and watched a video and just got to say it was like blown away. They did a really great job.
Yeah, I will say the podcast is like 2.5 hours. So it's a long podcast, but it's got a lot of great information. I truly enjoyed it. I know we had to stop it about a dozen times, maybe more.
Yeah, we did.
Because of interruptions and different things.
Well, who's got 2.5 hours just to sit down and watch?
Sit down? Yeah. So it takes a minute to watch, but it's worth it. Yeah. It's worth it. I've never heard of this podcast from the Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
Never heard of it. But the lady that was on there, her name is Erica Comazar.
Well, before we go into the video itself, maybe just like a quick recap of the write-up from the person that we know that watched it and why it caught our attention. Maybe that would be better to kind of launch off. Like what?
So I didn't ask her for permission, so I'm not gonna throw names out there. Well, but she really was just sharing a personal story about her and her son, and about her son being put in daycare at an early age, and seeing certain behavioral issues, anger and stuff like that she was seeing, and then understanding why that was happening. This podcast really resonated with her, and she wanted to share that story and how important it is for moms to be present with their kids. There's from 0 to 3 years old is like the most important time. Yeah. For moms to be there with their kids.
Yeah. And I know that really stood out to us. I mean, obviously, looking at this young lady's story, but it also resonated with us because I know when we had our last son, daycare was not going to be an option. We were going to.
Well, we had to sit down when you approached me about having another child. Yeah. I remember that I was like, oh no, like we're good.
Well, we had 4 girls.
Girls.
Thinking about throwing another one in the mix, it was like, I don't know if we're ready for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I don't know. And eventually we got to talking and we were both kind of ready to have another one. But we had a sit down conversation. Like, I would like to stay home with the new baby. And at that time, the other kids were pretty young. Like, was a 7-year-old, right? 7. Oof.
You're not going to be.
I'm not even going to go back through all the ages right now. But anyway,
yeah.
So I really wanted to stay home. I had that desire to stay home with the new baby. So we had to sit down and we had to make a lot of sacrifices. Lots of sacrifices. At the time, we cut our income in half, essentially.
Yep.
And I was okay with that. I was really okay with that because through our studies and what we had learned, we started to understand that was important for me to stay home. Now, we didn't know as much as we know now. Back then, we just felt like God was leading us to do this. So we cut our income in half and I stayed home with the baby and the kids, and it was a blessing. I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit of a struggle financially, going from 2 incomes to 1, but it was definitely necessary, and I would go back and do it all over again exactly the same way, because I can see now, fast forward, looking at our son that's now almost 14 years old. He's very well adjusted, very loving, and our daughter, because we had 2 full-time kids that were here all the time, but he was the youngest, and our daughter that was 7, like, really liked the time that I got to spend with her, which I think it was like 8 years that I was a stay-at-home mom.
8 years? That's how long it was?
It was like 8 years. Was it 8 years?
I just know when we first had the conversation, we talked about 4 years. So now that it's doubled, I don't even know anymore.
Well, it was 4 years, and then I started part-time. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was 4 years. And then as soon as our son went to VPK, then I started a very part-time job so I could be there after he got out. And then also to be able to pick up the kids from school.
Yeah.
And it just worked out. It was awesome. I think it was another 4 years that I did kind of part-time work that worked around the schedule for the kids.
Well, and that was part of the write-up that we saw, like, because she was sharing the benefits that she had noticed when she, in essence, plugged in, brought the kid back home, and seen the behavioral changes. And that was some of the benefits that we also had seen as you were basically plugged in, being a full-time mom, taking on that role, and how impactful it has been for our kids. So when we watch this video of this lady, man, it just resonated, because it was almost like God had pre-prepared us way before we knew these truths.
Yes.
And put it into practice. And we were experiencing the blessings of being obedient, what we felt that God and the Holy Spirit put on our hearts, of just being parents and doing something that was really against what the world had told us, because we were like everybody else. We thought you have to have 2 incomes to be able to survive. Yeah. Like, that was an ingrained, like, idea that I know both of us were on board with. Like, we have to have 2 full-time jobs. We got to be plugged in. We got to be doing X, Y, and Z. And when we stepped back and said, you know what, we just feel like this is the right thing to do, and we're deciding this together, and we're both in the boat together, and we're going to sink or we're going to go, but we're doing it together.
Well, you know what? As I think back now, we didn't know this information back then.
Not at all.
We did not know, because I actually had to take a break from my college classes to take care of the baby.
Yeah.
And I did not know this information back then, but I had this feeling that I needed to stay home with this child. Before, my mom had helped me out. When I had this baby, I wanted to be the primary person that was there to take care of him.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, didn't the college classes start toward the end of the 4-year period? Because I know, if I'm just thinking about the date-wise, I don't think in the front side.
I'm trying to put the time together.
Yeah.
Because did we start before? No, we started after, but it actually it was a little bit a longer stint for me to finish because of the baby.
Well, that was a choice that we had made. Like, let's not push as hard and drive so fast, because this is more important right now.
Right.
So I know for myself, I think it took me 5 years to get my bachelor's, somewhere around there for me. And I was still working and everything too. And I know yours took a second as well, but it wasn't about the time.
I mean, we got it done, which was,
in
essence, the goal. But what was most important at the time was hey, let's figure out this thing so I'd be able to stay home with the baby, which was awesome. I loved it. And now seeing this video that we came upon this past week confirmed all the decisions we made back then, because we had to make a lot of sacrifices, which a lot of people couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we literally, like, for some people, not having cable TV back, like, when we made all these decisions was a big deal. Well, we decided, we just went down the list of the bills that we could cut, and we did, because if one income is going out, we're cutting as much as possible.
Well, I think you want to put this cup over there on the side over there. I think that's what was important, first of all, that we had the conversation, but deciding, and I think it really helped bring us together as a couple, because it required us to sit down and get real and really have the tough conversations. Like, do we really need this? And I know when we started getting rid of some stuff, it was some of those like, well, hold on a second. Are we sure about this? But after we did make the cuts, man, I was so surprised. Like, looking back, what you really don't need.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that we were doing and we had in our life that were extras, and I would say now luxuries, if you will. But they weren't necessities.
Right.
And I think for me, I think that was some of the things that I bought into, some of the lies that I believed, that made me think that we needed that stuff, which would require us, again, to think we needed two incomes to be able to provide for those things, because without them, we were less than, or without them, we weren't going to be happy. Without them, people were going to look at us a certain kind of way. But the truth of the matter is, none of that stuff mattered. Like, none of that stuff mattered. The most important thing, which we discovered, was relationship. Like, being present with our kids, and specifically you as a mom, the most important thing was that you were there raising our child. Like, that was the most important thing.
It was very important to me. And I tried to make sure I didn't take any of that time for granted.
Yeah.
It was awesome to see our son grow up and him have that healthy attachment to me, which is something that I really, really wanted, which is what this lady that we're talking about today, what she was talking about, a lot of healthy attachment and then attachment disorders that could happen when you as mom, as the primary caregiver, is not present.
Yeah.
From 0 to 3 years old of that child's life, and the things that could occur when you're not present. Now, I'm not going to try and get all clinical, because she is a clinical social worker, psychoanalyst, and a parent guidance expert.
Yeah. No, just before I forget, I will put the link in the description of the podcast of ours, so people can go find the link and find the actual video that we're talking about. Because, I really would like people to take a look and watch it if they want to learn more about it, which I think would be very beneficial. Because it kind of just gives you new eyes to see some of these things and why they're important. And that's why I like this particular video. I know it's a lot of talking about attachment and daycare and the mother's role and the father's role.
But she also talks about, like, what you hear a lot, ADHD.
Yeah, there's some of that in her too as well.
Which is like things that I wasn't aware of. But she kind of backs a lot of her stuff up. Is all like research based. It's all fact based. It's not opinion. She's got 30 years of private practice experience, and she's been doing all this research for many, many years. So it's really great information to give you some insight into, like you were sharing, like the differences between men and women and taking care of kids that people really don't. This is not common knowledge.
Well, it's definitely not something that they're preaching from, the top of, media by any means. And I know here lately there's been a big push trying to get back to traditional values and those type of things, which I think is a good thing. I think we've gotten away from it over the years, but just that I love to learn about core things that God has done and God has created and why they're important. And then recognizing how, again, I feel like the enemy has deceived us to get away from God's design and plan.
Oh, yeah.
I know we talk about a lot in marriage, like men not walking in the fullness of the role of husband, or wives walking in the fullness of the role of wives, but also that element of parenting, which is also another key element. I mean, one of the commands that God gives us is to go forward and be fruitful and multiply. Right. To raise family, to raise godly children. Well, if you're not home and you're not present as a parent, like if you're not plugged in, how are you going to raise godly children? Like, who's teaching your kids? Who's teaching your kids the things of the Lord? Which, I mean, as parents, like we're their primary influence, right? And having those healthy attachments helping that kid feel safe and feel healthy and feel loved is really going to open them up to receive when you're sharing those truths with them.
Right.
Like parents, we are the first representation of God in those kids' lives. I mean, if you really think about it, when kids first come out, they are fully dependent on their parents. I mean, to all degrees. They can't feed themselves. They can't wipe themselves. They can't do anything. They are fully dependent on their parents. Like they have to, in essence, lay their lives down in their parents' hands. I mean, and they don't have any choice in the matter because, right, they're little kids. But knowing that as a parent, that's your responsibility. You are fully responsible for the welfare of this child. Physically, emotional, psychologically, and spiritually.
Well, and I thought it was great because as she's speaking on this podcast, like I have my biblical filter on, right? Listening to everything she's saying, and it all aligns with God's word.
Yeah.
Like it feels in my spirit, like it really was like, you know what, this has to have been God's design. Because if you think about back in biblical times, like there was like a whole community of family that kind of lived together in the same vicinity. Everybody helped each other out.
Yeah.
And we have gotten away from that in these times where people kind of isolate and are more to themselves than except like us Hispanics over here, we kind of congregate together and we have a good community of people around us. Because my mom's always, God bless her, she's always tried to be close to us to help out with the babies whenever necessary. But she was always an advocate of moms being home with the kids. Like you need to spend more time with the babies.
Yeah.
So I just found this podcast to be super insightful. And for those that didn't catch the name on the front side, the lady on here, her name is Erica Comazar. I've never heard of her before. So God brings some of this information at the time that is needed, because I feel now in our world today here in the United States, it almost feels like everything is starting to shift to get back in order. And I feel this is some information that is timely to share with maybe some young parents that don't understand that there is a way to have marriage and family and work at some point in your life, but still mom be able to stay home and dad, maybe for this beginning season of the child for the first 3 years, be the one that provides. And it comes with sacrifices. And I love this woman because she is very direct. She's not beating around the bush. She is giving you what she calls the inconvenient truth. Because a lot of people feel inconvenienced by kids. Some people are choosing not to have kids.
Yes.
Because they feel it's an inconvenience. However, like you shared that verse from the Bible, that God called us to be fruitful, right? To bring forth life, to give him godly offspring, in essence, to, teach our children the ways of the Lord. And that's another reason why I really wanted to stay home, because I wanted to raise my kids a certain type of way that I know if I had given my kids to a stranger in daycare or whatever, they're not going to teach my kid what I want to teach my kid.
Well, let's just be honest. No one is going to teach your kids exactly like you would.
No.
Even family members are not. They don't always have the same ideas, values, and morals that you do.
Right.
So, I mean, anyone that you allow in the presence of your child or in the raising in that responsibility, you got to be really careful
for sure
to guard and protect your children. I mean, these are our most precious gifts that the Lord gives us.
Right.
Like all the stuff, all the created stuff. I mean, it's just what it is. It's just stuff.
Right.
But a human life that God calls you to raise and have that responsibility, like you can't just take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
Like it's a very important responsibility. And I think we got to do that as parents. And like you said, understanding some of those truths, inconvenient truths, are I like myself, excuse me, I got a cough here, is talking about like understanding some of the myths that we've come to believe. That's what I liked about it, because she did call out some myths as she read them all. Like she didn't do them all at once, but throughout the podcast, she was pointing out some of these myths, and I'm like, man, that's true.
Are there some that you remember that stood out to you?
Well, the one thing, just when it talks about roles, and I'd love to learn about the different roles of a man and a woman and a husband and a wife and a father and a mother, and really recognizing some of those myths that we adopt just as truth that never get challenged. And that's one thing I liked what she said here is like, the guy asked her, like, why is this so important to you that you share these things? She says, because no one's talking about it. No one's sharing truth about these things. And in essence, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't want to see these children get hurt.
Right.
Because it hurts children when they're not being raised right.
Right.
And I know for myself, as it pertains to marriage, that's one of the things, unfortunately, that we had both been through a divorce, like, and seeing what it did to our children, what it did to us, like, that was one of the things, like, divorce. I don't want that to be an option for anyone. If there's any other way that people can get a hold of truth that can transform their lives and protect their marriages, I want to help them.
Right.
Because I don't want people to go through the hurt that we've experienced and that our kids have experienced.
And that's why we do what we do.
Well, yeah, 100%.
That's why, like, marriage counseling and marriage coaching is so important, because we've been on the other side of both of these things.
Yeah.
And I know when I had my first child, I was divorced very early. Now, this was even before my walk with the Lord, but I was divorced when she was only 2 months old. So it was very, very difficult, not understanding a lot of these principles. And I was very blessed that I had my mom that lived down the street, and she was very helpful during the time, because I still had to work as a single mom. I couldn't, as much as I wanted to stay home, I was able to stay home the first 3 months, but that's all that I could do because I was a single mom. So as a single mom, I definitely welcome that help from my mom with my daughter, which was awesome, because my mom was very she still is very nurturing, very much about the kids. So she was very, very helpful, as much as I wanted to be there. But that's why when we had our second child together, I was like, whatever we can do, if we can do it, I would love to stay home with this baby until he goes to school. And I was so happy to hear you be so accommodating about it. And again, it came with a lot of sacrifice. I want to make sure that I say that, because I don't want people to think that I'm selling them some kind of, dream world fantasy life, because it does come with a lot of sacrifices. Having kids sometimes can be very challenging. We have a lot of challenging times.
Sometimes, I think all the time.
Okay, all the time. However, it opens you up to experience a certain type of love that you won't get anywhere else when you're able to have a kid and be able to raise your kid and have that bond with your child. It's a love like no other. So I'm a big proponent of moms staying home with their kids for as long as possible. I absolutely despise daycares. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't want daycare people.
You're gonna step on toes. That's fine.
I know I will. I appreciate the service that they're trying to provide people. But moms, all you moms out there is a great benefit to you staying home and sacrificing for a time for your children.
Well, I think that's important to understand, is that, like, that sacrifice, it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain.
Correct.
And you got one shot at raising these kids. And you can't, if you can help making mistakes, you definitely should try not to make the mistakes if you can. Because there's things, again, that you can do to get on the path,
right.
And again, it's like taking some of these truths that you learn, and you may not be able to do it perfectly, but at least try to get in that direction and understand why it's important. Even all the way down to the point, like you said, a single mom, recognizing, okay, you may have to go to work, but guess what? When you come home, you got to be plugged into that kid.
I'm super present. Yeah.
Because you didn't have that time during the day, or that time, that time for that relationship.
Right.
You're missing out on something. So when you are there, don't be distracted on your phone. Don't be distracted by other things that are not of most important. And again, it's for a season. It's for a time. It's not forever.
And I love also that she does a great job explaining what happens with kids when you're not plugged in, when you're not fully present. So it's definitely a great video to go watch. Take the time. I know we said it's 2.5 hours, but you can break it up in pieces like we did, and definitely have conversations with, amongst each other as a couple. Have conversations about what you want for your family, how you want your kids to, like, attach to you, because she goes over attachment disorders, which is what happens when kids, don't have that healthy healthy attachment with their primary caregiver. Which I loved, because I know as we're watching this video, we paused it a lot to have a lot of conversation, because with my first daughter, like I said, I came to be home, a stay-at-home mom. She was like I think 7 years old. So that's the next piece that this Erica talks about. That's really important for brain development. So I was very fortunate to be able to be with my daughter in that next season, fully present with her when she was still in elementary school and middle school, and just be really present for those pivotal moments of brain development, which he really talks about. I just think it's important for everybody to hear this stuff.
Yeah. And guys, this video that we're talking about, that we will put a link in our podcast so you can go find it. We're only scratching the surface. I mean, the big thing here to take away is that as far as being parents, you got to be present. I mean, you can't parent and be absent. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And being present is so important. And we believe with 100% certainty that's by God's design. We always say within the podcast, like, God gave kids 2 parents because he knew he needed them. They're both important, a father and a mother. Like, you can't replace those roles, and they're designed by God. And for us as adults, like, our job is to learn how we can do better at it, how we can mature at it, learn from our mistakes. Like, none of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes, guys, but the truth is it's never too late. It's never too late to learn and get better.
And that's why this, like us sharing resources like this one is really important, because a lot of people don't understand like the way the brain works in a man and a woman, and how the different influences with mom and dad into that child's life, how it works and how important it is for both mom and dad to have their influence on this child.
Yeah, and that's a big part that we didn't get into a lot. I know we talked a lot about moms on this our short podcast here, because it's not 2.5 hours. We try to keep it under 30. But like, the father's role is also
very important,
equally important. It's just different.
Right.
And that's a lot of things that people, in our society, they've gotten away from, like the role of the father and the importance of the father being plugged into his kids, plugged into the family, and what that does, and again, learning some of those truths, like, wow, I think it would help fathers step up and lean in to their role if they really knew how important it was.
Well, I mean, I think it's safe to say that society has really confused people in their roles.
Well, it is, because, I mean, for so long, babe, I mean, you've heard it, I've heard it. It's like men and women are equal, which we are in value in the eyes of God, but our roles are unique.
Very unique.
And again, by God's design. And I think the more we learn those uncomfortable truths or inconvenient truths, we take back ground from the enemy.
Yes.
Like, we really do. And when you're walking in the fullness of the role that God has designed you for, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, and as a mother, you're going to be equipped to do what God's called you to do. And it is to raise godly children.
And the evidence will be in your kids as you see them, as they are growing up, to be well adapted, happy, have that healthy attachment to their parents. Like, it's important to understand that.
Yeah.
So that's why it was important for us to bring it up today, and definitely share the link to this video. Hopefully we can get it out to the masses. She's also got a couple books that she's written.
Yep.
That would be great for, folks that like to read and really learn about this stuff. It's really important. And I pray that we can continue to bring some of these truths to people, because it's time to get things back in order
100%.
in the home, the way that God calls them to be.